So let's go ahead and just dive in. There are a few things. This whole world of cybersecurity is really sort of just ramping up out of control just a little bit. If you look at any of the statistics, we're talking trillions and trillions of dollars that are being spent by companies who are getting hacked, and it's really just out of control. From the perspective of small businesses, most of these trillions of dollars are coming from small businesses. And unfortunately, the way that the press covers this, it covers it and says, oh, there was this big oil refinery out east that gets hacked, and they ended up paying $11.5 million, and that's sort of what catches the press. When in reality, most of the money and most of the extortion that's happening because of these cyber criminals is all happening in the small business market. It's $5,000 and $10,000, and it's all these little pieces that are adding up to these trillions and trillions of dollars. So this cybersecurity thing is not something that's the concern of the big enterprise businesses. This thing is really dialed into the small business space too. Unfortunately, for the cyber criminals sort of on the other side of the page, this is a really great job. In a lot of these countries where a lot of the cyber crime is coming from, if you are talented and smart, and you're able to get a job at one of these companies, you make a lot of money. I mean, you can make $150,000, $160,000, $200,000, and in a lot of these, Eastern Bloc countries and where a lot of this cybercrime is coming from, that's a pile of money. I mean, you're actually one of the top earners in your community if you're able to be a cyber criminal. So, unfortunately, it's really good business. The other unfortunate thing is, because this is sort of spiraling out of control, the numbers that I have here, all of these trillions of dollars, when we were about halfway through, these numbers are from 2020. The 2021 numbers, they haven't compiled those yet, but halfway through 2020, we had already hit all of the projections that they had had. So this isn't something that's sort of trickling in. This is like escalating like at a crazy rate. The amount of sort of extortion and the amount of stuff that's happening in this world. Unfortunately, the cyber criminals really prey on us as individuals, and they take things that are in the news in order to spoof us and to help get us kind of hooked in and reeled in. So they're using coronavirus right now. They're using all the new variants of coronavirus to build these very clever emails and these very clever packages that go out to feed on our emotions as we hit the internet and continually hit our phones and email and stuff. They prey on our emotions, and they play on our sensitivities and our willingness to click on stuff. So we'll get an email from somebody that says, hey, look at this new coronavirus report, and click here for more information, and bang, all of a sudden we've exposed ourselves to something bad. So we need to be super diligent in this, and we need to understand kind of from the cyber criminals' perspective, they're really trying to feed on our weaknesses as human beings. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more just a bit. This is one of the things, and we'll really hit on this in just a few minutes, but the whole landscape of cyber crime has really changed. And the most dangerous things in any cybersecurity environment are the ones that you don't see. It used to be that all of this cyber crime was very much at the surface, and as soon as the bad guys got into your system, they would let you know right away. And right now what we're finding is they are hiding in the background and infecting your networks and small business networks without you ever even knowing about it. So unbelievably scary in that sense. We have a fairly recent, one of our recent partners has a story regarding this. They had a front desk computer that had been hacked. And so the IT company that they were working with, they gave them a call, and the IT company came running in and said, oh my gosh, we need to fix this. And so they fixed that front desk computer. They removed the virus from it and thought that the infection was all cleaned and ready to go. Unfortunately, the infection, this virus infection, resurfaced, and the IT company came out and cleaned it again. The company, this manufacturing company in the Twin Cities, lost confidence in their IT provider, and they called us and said, can you guys take a look at this? We need to have somebody really look at this. And so we went in with some of the tools that we have, and we discovered that the bad guys, these cyber criminals, had been in their network for 6 to 12 months. This is a manufacturing company that has a very high test polymer that they've developed that withstands incredible amounts of heat. And there's kind of a secret sauce. There's a secret formula that they use to do this. And the bad guys had been in their systems and listening for all of that financial information, all of this high test manufacturing information that they had. And they'd been listening for 6 to 12 months. So we were able to dive in there, remove the virus entirely from the network, figure out where the bad guys had been getting in, and fix this thing. The point is that this company was just sort of going about average everyday business, didn't have any idea that anything was wrong, and they went on for 6 to 12 business, fully infected, and never had any idea. So bad deal. This is a kind of a hacker timeline that we put together to sort of illustrate this a little bit. There's a lot of, when a hacker or an organization, there's a lot of planning that they do to sort of get ready for any kind of hacker threat that they're going to launch that they do. What they do then is they launch this typically through a bunch of bots that they release onto the internet. When they find a victim and they are able to get into the system, they go through and they then spread the virus infection throughout the network. So it's not just one individual that's infected. Everybody in the network ends up being infected. And then they finally, over the course of time, they decide, what is it that this company has that we can sell? Is it going to be data? Is it financial information? Is it protected health information? What exactly is it that we're going to be able to sell? And they kind of figure all this out. And you can see on this timeline from day one, it sometimes takes 200 days or more before the infection is ever even discovered. So that's bad news for all of us. So our role as small business owners and as just computer users in general, our role is to stop getting hacked. Unfortunately, the people who are funding all of these cyber criminal efforts are us. Every time that we read in the paper or we see a story on the internet about a company that gets hacked, the immediate reaction is, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for these people. And that's right? We should feel sorry for these people. On the other hand, we have to start to take some responsibility for this and understand that when, as a small business owner, if I'm hacked and I end up sending $20,000 in Bitcoin over to some bank account overseas, I'm funding these efforts. And we all need to bolster our systems and get ourselves into a position where we stop getting hacked, so we stop funding all of these efforts. So today I want to talk a little bit about who's targeted. I want to talk a little bit about why the human condition, just being human, really helps facilitate a lot of this cyber crime. I want to point out 3 fairly significant paradigm shifts that are happening right now that all business owners, all business leaders, and just people in general really need to understand these paradigm shifts and kind of what they are. And we need to just kind of admit and start a kind of a community awareness that we need to make some changes. Otherwise, this thing is never going to go away and is just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. So the question is, who's a target? And this ends up being one of the most frustrating questions that I and we have to answer sort of all the time. The problem with it is that most business owners will tell you, I'm not a target. I own a little tiny printing company. I own a small health clinic in downtown St. Paul. I just don't, I don't really think that the bad guys are going to hack me. And I have to look at them and say, this, you just don't quite understand. This is no longer a deal where we have a mischievous young kid with a laptop who's trying to dive into your system and hack you. These are very well organized, very well funded, big organizations that are raising and generating millions of dollars every year by going through this system. So who's a target? Everybody's a target. If you've ever been hacked before, you're especially a target because they know that you have vulnerabilities. It's crazy the number of these attacks that we see and the individuals and organizations that we see being attacked. We were called upon a few months ago to help a small church in St. Cloud figure out a way to purchase Bitcoin to pay the bad guys who had hacked into their system. This is a community church, and again in St. Cloud. They spend a ton of their time and resources feeding poor people and providing clothing for poor people that can't afford it. That is not somebody that you would think would be a target of a cybercrime. They're doing good in the world. All they're trying to do is help people. They got hacked and the bad guys wanted them to send Bitcoin for them to get their information back. Everybody is a target, and we all need to start to really understand that. Part of the reason why cyber criminals are so incredibly effective right now is they prey upon us as humans. And us as humans have some vulnerabilities that are built into us. In order for you to be a good person, you need to trust others. And the bad guys, unfortunately, the bad guys feed on that. So they'll put together a script or an email, and then the email will say something like, "Oh, hey, this is Mark calling you today from Microsoft. Hey, how you doing today in Minneapolis?" And they will earn, because of the fact that we as humans want to trust others, they will pony up on that, and they will use that against us. We as human beings, we're taught from a very young age to avoid conflict. We don't go around every single day trying to pick fights, right? And and the hackers, these organizations and these peoples know that. So they'll call you up and they'll say, "Hey, this is John from the energy company. We're going to be around your offices tomorrow." And what you do as just a good person is you say, "Oh, John, how can I help?" That's what we're trained to do from a very young age. And that's exactly the kind of doors that the cyber criminals, they want you to open. We as humans, we want to help. We want to trust others. And the cyber criminals are using all of those attributes against us in all these different activities that they have.
So Mark, just a quick question on that. So what's our response to someone who does indeed try to make that call and say, you know, I'm Joe Blow with this and I want to do a survey or whatever? You know, how do we handle that? What's our position on that? Not meaning Imagine IT, but collectively in terms of cybersecurity. What's my response?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say first off is that, and you'll see this from banks and you'll hear this from Microsoft or from pretty much anybody, no company is ever going to ask you for any of that information in an email. And they're very likely to ask you that information on the phone either, right? The best thing to do if you get a phone call from somebody and they're asking you for any personal information is to say, "You know what, we're going through some cybersecurity training right now. Why don't you give me your phone number and I'll call you back and verify it." So you can call them and outreach to them and make sure that when you're calling, they are indeed from Xcel Energy or they are indeed from Microsoft. Okay. So, but I think, Mary, the number one thing that everybody can do is just sort of put your sensors up there, your spidey senses up there, and if anything feels fishy, just don't go any further, right? Mm-hmm. There won't be any companies that ever ask you for your username and password. They flat out won't do it. It's against every company protocol out there. Okay. So if anybody does that, you need to say, "Well, I tell you what, I need to check with my administrator," or, you know, let me contact and reach out to you. Super good question, though.
All right.
So the first paradigm shift that I want to talk about is this whole concept of who the hacker is. And the reason why this is important is because this brings everybody sort of into the equation. If you look at the businesses in the Twin Cities, different places estimate that there might be 30,000 or so businesses in the Twin Cities. And if there was a hacker in the Twin Cities, and this hacker was in a black hoodie, and he had a laptop, and he was furiously typing on his laptop and, you know, doing all this stuff like you always see in the movies, the chances of this one hacker choosing your business to hack you is very slim. You're 1 in 30,000. And if that were the case, and if that was reality, if the hackers today were these individual script kiddies who are in their basement pounding away trying to hack into your systems, the chances of you being hacked by that person are pretty remote. And I would have a tough time saying you need to be really vigilant about protecting yourself, because there's a guy out there who's going to hack you. But that is not the case. That is not what's happening right now. What's happening is the cyber criminal, if you look at these 4 pictures on this slide right here, we typically have this vision of a hacker as being sort of this person in the hoodie, but the hackers in these communities around the globe are highly trained, super smart. Like we said before, they make a ton of money, and they're in these organizations that are hundreds of people deep. They have incredibly deep pockets. They have all of the best equipment and resources that they could possibly have. And most of the hacking that they do is done through automation. So they send out not one bot, but they'll send out hundreds of thousands of bots across the internet. And it's these bots that are constantly knocking on our doors to see if we have vulnerabilities, to see if they can get in and hack us. So we have to get this idea out of our heads that the hacker is an individual. This hacker is an organization. It's a movement of thousands of different people who are constantly trying to get at our information and at our data. At the toppest and probably, I don't know, the most extreme, we know that there are nation states like North Korea, like Iran, who have, in North Korea, they have a whole regiment. Part of their army is, their whole goal is to hack and extort money. That's how they fund their military efforts. So this isn't just a one person who's trying to get into your network. These are global organizations that are trying to get into everything. They have budgets to meet, and they have unbelievable amount of resources to get this stuff done. Second thing that we need to understand, and this is a development that's happened and really sort of come to full fruition here in the last probably 5 to 7 years, and that is the dark web. And the dark web is really sort of the foundation of why this cybersecurity stuff is proliferating so highly and is really scary. The dark web is basically a place, it's a marketplace, just like eBay, for data that's been stolen. And data now is the most valuable commodity that's out there. There has been a dark web in existence for a long time where where bad guys could buy weapons, and they could buy drugs, and they could buy, you know, some of the sex trade has happened on the dark web. Data now has become the most valuable commodity on the dark web. What does that mean to all of us? That means that when we talk about the bad guys, the cyber criminals getting to our organizations and listening for data, this is what they're doing. They're listening for financial data. They're listening for personal information about our employees. They're listening for data and information about our customers. They're listening for any of the secret sauce that makes organizations and businesses work. And they will then go out on the dark web, and they will just put this out there just like an eBay posting, and people will bid on it. And they'll say, oh, I'd love to get that contact. I'd love to get that contact base from that company, and I'll pay you guys $10,000 for it. And they do it. They're using some cryptocurrencies and some different methods to pay for these things. And this dark web has really opened up this whole idea of selling sensitive data or data that's been captured and stolen. Without the dark web, we wouldn't see nearly the proliferation of this like we have in the past. So this is a pretty big thing. There is a system, and this is if you're working with a computer company or you're working with IT advisors right now, there is a system called an intrusion detection system that is actually designed to sit on your network. It sort of sits inside your network behind your firewall, and it listens for traffic from within your network. So if the bad guys are in your network and they're stealing your data, they have to communicate with the outside back to the mothership, whoever their main organization is. They have to communicate that information back to the mothership. An intrusion detection system sits inside your network and listens for that data going from the outside in.
Interesting.
What's that? Somebody have a question?
No, I just said that's very interesting.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time as IT people or business owners, we spend a ton of time working on protecting our environment. So we have antivirus to keep people out, and we have a firewall that keeps the bad guys out, and we have all these systems in place that keep the bad guys out. Unfortunately, even the Department of Defense right now, Homeland Security, are talking about cybersecurity breaches not as if you get breached, but when you get breached. Mm-hmm. And they're sort of changing that terminology into being something that's called cyber resilience versus cyber protection. Cyber resilience assumes you're going to be breached, and the way that you sort of judge the strength of your network is, once you're breached, how quickly can you recover? So if you get breached and your organization can recover in a matter of minutes, you're very, very secure.
Question
if you get,
go ahead, Laura.
So, like, are there, if the dark web is so big and massive, is there studies or anything like the good companies going out to purchase from their competitors this data and this information, or who's buying it? Is it? Do you know what I mean? It's like, is it tempting for a certain segment as it's switched over? Because I'm thinking, like, who's now the on bot?
It's a good question. I'm thinking that we'll probably it's going to come up very shortly that that a company is going to be busted for buying this kind of information. I haven't seen any massive stories of it right now, but you know how it is. Some organizations, they'll do anything to get ahead. And if they know that they can get ahead by buying their customer's customer list, you have to assume it's going to happen, right? I haven't seen any things that have blown up right now, but the government is doing a pretty good job. They've infiltrated, and you've seen this happen. You'll see this crop up every once in a while in news stories, how the government has infiltrated some part of Silk Road. Was a big thing a while ago that was part of that dark web, and they will infiltrate it and figure out who the players are, and then there'll be a big drug bust or a big arms bust or something. So I haven't seen as much of that with data, but you got to figure it's coming because it's all out there.
It's kind of the evolution of it, right, Mark?
Yep, for sure. Yep, great question. So the third thing, and this other paradigm shift is really something that we all have to think about. We had to do a little bit of self-introspection as Imagine IT, as an IT provider in the Twin Cities, in the way that we were going about kind of discerning and protecting our client partners. What we had done for many years, and we just changed this a few years ago, but we would go into a new organization and we would do an assessment of the organization, and we would say, we would define and determine all of these different vulnerabilities that the organization would have. We'd say, oh, your firewall's a little old, your antivirus isn't doing exactly what it should do, you have some old applications here that don't have the right security patches. And we would go through and we would make a list of all of the different things that the company had and all these vulnerabilities. Most of the time when we go in and do this, these lists would be fairly significant. There would be 10 items on the list or 20 items on the list, and we would have a conversation with the leadership team or the owner of this company, and we'd say, wow, we did this evaluation. We found all of these different vulnerabilities here that your organization has. what do you think we should do with this? And the owner would look at the list and say, well, there's no way I'm going to cover all these things. It's way too expensive. This is going to be way too disruptive. What are the top 2 or 3 or 4 things you think we should do? Let's address those things first and just start making some headway with this. And I, as their IT provider, would say, that's great. That's a great plan. We feel like these 4 or 5 things are the most important things for us to address. Let's go ahead and get those things fixed for you. And we'll put these other things on a timeline, and we'll come back to those later. I would feel really, as their trusted advisor, I would feel really good about that we were making some headway. On the other side of the table, the CEO would feel really good about that because they had taken the steps to start making some headway in their cybersecurity protections. Essentially, this doesn't make any sense because what we're really doing is we're really leaving that conversation knowing that we have 10 or 12 or 15 vulnerabilities that are wide open. We were able to find them, and we're just going to leave those things open and cross our fingers and hope that the bad guys don't find those vulnerabilities before we come back and fix them. It just doesn't make any sense. If I were a newlywed and my wife and I were going to have a new child, and I went to my wife and I sat her down at the kitchen table and I said, honey, with our new child, I want to make sure that our home is safe and protected. I really want to, there's some crazy things going on in our neighborhood. I want to get a security guy in here to take a look at our house. Security guy takes a look at our house and comes back with this whole list of things and says, we need to put locks on your front doors and the side doors and your garage door and the windows and all the stuff. And it's going to cost you X number of dollars. There's no chance that my wife and I would sit down and say, well, honey, let's do the front door and the back door. And let's come around in 6 or 12 months and we'll do the garage doors and the windows. You would do that way of protecting. This doesn't make any sense. But essentially, that's kind of the way that we've handled security in the past. And we need to change that and create a different sort of an approach. And this is an approach that there are several companies in the Twin Cities, several companies across the country, not many yet, but there are few that have more of a shield approach, which means they're going to come and figure out a way to protect everything, all of these vulnerabilities sort of all at once. Our solution that Imagine IT has and deploys is something that we call the Security Shield. And what we do is we take a look at all of these different vulnerabilities, all the known vulnerabilities, and the vulnerabilities that we know that are there on these customer networks, and we plug all of those holes all at one time. We have to get out of this idea of this sort of wish list approach toward providing cybersecurity.
Mark, can I ask a question? The a la carte version versus the shield approach. Would people be doing that more out of a financial consideration, or is it more out of ignorance? I'm not really understanding that I need that every door and every window closed.
I think it's, there's a little bit of, ignorance might be a little bit strong, I think. But I think there's a lack of understanding of how dangerous this is, for one. I think you're exactly right there. Yeah. I think it is a financial thing, and that's been sort of the challenge, right? Because if I had this list of 20 different things that the company had, and I looked at the CFO and I said, you're going to need to just drop us a check for 35 grand for us to fix all this stuff, the person might say, not going to happen. That's not in the cards right now. And so that's been a little bit of the challenge. We had to rethink the way that we charged for this because we knew that we weren't going to be able to go out to our customers and just ask them for $50,000 or $70,000 to fix all this stuff. Okay. And so we've changed the way that we charge for it and changed sort of the methodology and the thinking around it so that it is affordable and something that any business can do. And I think, like I said, there are 3 or 4 companies. Minneapolis, for whatever reason, is a bit of a cybersecurity hotbed. And there are 3 or 4 other companies in Minneapolis that are doing the same thing that have sort of figured out the same deal. And it's going to sort of much smaller monthly subscription-based thing rather than being just a big, huge, fat check that you've got to write up front. Okay. And honestly, that's the best way. Nobody likes to pay ongoing monthly fees, but it is 100% the best way to handle your cybersecurity, because there are changes and vulnerabilities that happen every month, and you need to continue to raise your level. And with a monthly subscription, you're able to do that.
Okay, Mark, there was a question prior to today's webinar, and that was a small business owner has Norton antivirus and was curious as to whether or not that was going to give them the protection they need as a small business.
Yep, good question. I mean, Norton is certainly one of the top players in the antivirus world. They have a security suite. It's more than just their antivirus product. So it's a suite of different products that does malware, and it does a few other things. Any antivirus now needs to be part of a bigger holistic system. It really should be tied into your firewall. It should be tied into products like Office 365, have various things that tie into an antivirus. And it comes back to, if you look at this diagram here behind me, each one of these individual little blocks, the red blocks are items within this network that are not protected. The green blocks are the ones that are protected. Antivirus is represented in one of these blocks. So there are in this diagram that we use, there are about 30 of these blocks that you have to protect. So in your case, and in this case, Mary, of the person with the question about the antivirus, Norton Antivirus, yes, very good antivirus, and represents one of these blocks. If that's all you have is antivirus and a firewall, you're covering 2 of the 30 things, and you're vulnerable. Hate to say it, but you're vulnerable.
All right,
So,
a question just came up asking about cybersecurity insurance for small businesses.
Yes. Very interesting question, and very much a gray area right now. If you talk to, I've got a bunch of friends of mine who have insurance practices. Some of them have had insurance practices for 30 or 40 years, and they're just not interested in getting into cybersecurity. And so there are a lot of cybersecurity policies out there right now that are basically BS. They'll throw a rider on your policy and say this is going to be $2,000 more a year and is going to cover you for these things, and pretty much anything in the real world that would happen to you is not covered on that policy.
Okay.
So my answer to the person who asked this question, and it's a great question, and every single business should be concerned with this. You need to have somebody review your cyber insurance policy and make sure that you're protected. Because there are a lot of policies out there right now. The insurance companies have just kind of come up with this deal, and they just had to offer something because they knew it was out there, and the policies don't cover anything. Okay. So that's a really, really, really good question.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, let's kind of bounce through, keep going through here. The interesting thing with cybersecurity is still the weakest part of every network is individuals. It's end users. If you look at the number of breaches and you look at the impact that these breaches have had, the amount of dollars that are lost, it's a staggering percentage of loss that's coming from a person who clicked on an email, or a person who went to a website and clicked on something on a website. It's typically not a breakdown in the system. It's not because the business didn't have the right kind of antivirus, or it's not because the business didn't have a good enough firewall. It's typically just a person that went out and gave somebody some information or clicked on something wrong. And this really points to the fact that we need training. Any organization, there are all kinds of different training methodologies that are out there right now. But I'll tell you, peer pressure is 100% the most effective. So we have a training process that we use for all of our client partners, that we will send fake phishing emails to everybody in a company on a quarterly basis or on a monthly basis, and we'll see how many people we can trick into clicking on a bad email. And then when they click on the bad email, something will pop up on their screen right away and they'll say, oh, remember how we talked about not clicking on weird emails like this? And we will automatically enroll them in a mandatory 5-minute little cyber training class. So being busted on this and doing the cyber training class is part of it, but the peer pressure of being busted is the biggest thing. It makes people question clicking on links or clicking on emails that come from people that they don't know. And so every company out there right now should have some sort of regular cyber training going on. Otherwise, they're kind of just asking for trouble. Passwords is another tricky thing. We recommend passwords that are at least 15 characters long. And pretty much every time I've ever said that to people, I get a big, huge eye roll, and most people say, no way, not going to happen. The users in my organization will never use 15 character passwords. Thanks for coming, but that's never going to happen. And most people, when they think of passwords, and they think when we have this conversation about passwords, the password that they have in their mind is capital J, 1, 2, asterisk, slash, lowercase a, 2, these crazy passwords, right? That it takes you like 15 minutes to remember what it is. You can't remember what it is, so you put it on a Post-it note right next to your computer, which completely defeats the purpose of a password. You know, you can't type it, you mess it up, so you go backspace, 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 and you have to type it in again. It takes you 15 minutes. If that's the way passwords were built, nobody would use a long password. What we recommend for everybody to use is do a passphrase instead of a password. So the one illustration that I have here is Minnesota, capital M, Minnesota Spring 19, exclamation point. That password is long enough so that a hacker couldn't just brute force that password. It uses words that I normally type. I'm a decent typist, so it's not bad for me to type Minnesota Spring 19, exclamation point. Because it has numbers, characters, capital and lowercase letters, it has enough variety where people can't really guess that. And so this passphrase is a very, very effective password for anybody to use on a network. So instead of thinking about these crazy complex, hashtag umlaut, backspace, 1, 2, all this crazy stuff in your password, just use words that you would regularly use. Mm-hmm. If you were a Seasons fan, when it turns summer season, you might change your password to Minnesota Summer 19, exclamation point. Again, you change the password with enough regularity where the bad guys, if they were in your system, couldn't guess it. And it's long enough to where even a supercomputer wouldn't be able to get a hold of that password in enough time. Anybody have any questions on passwords? This is again, when you look at the fact that end users are the biggest vulnerability in a network, having adequate passwords is critically important. The next thing we want.
Ruth has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Ruth.
Define the word regularly.
Well, we would, if you had a 15-character password, the last information that I saw said that you should change your passwords at least twice a year. And basically that's just the math of a supercomputer or a very high-test computer going through and trying every single iteration of every character on a keyboard. It would take them about 12 months to get through a 15-character password. So the experts are saying if you change your passwords twice a year, you're probably okay. We recommend maybe a little bit more than that. If you did it 4 times a year, I think you're fine. You're way better off to have a longer password changed less frequently than a character that's shorter that you change more often, if that makes sense.
Okay, I've got one more question from Dan R. Thanks, Dan. How do you recommend distributing passwords in a remote environment?
Good question. Within most of the email systems, there is encryption. And so we would recommend that if you're going to send it via email, to send it in an encrypted email. Otherwise, you can just jump on the phone. You know, the old school phone is pretty darn good for exchanging information like that.
Okay. And then I have another question from Joseph. Is passwords with characters better to minimize brute force?
Yes, for sure. And honestly, when you talk brute force is just going to take every single character. So it doesn't make any difference if it's an asterisk or a capital M. It's just guessing every single character. You would use special characters like dollar signs. Replacing a dollar sign for an S is good when people are trying to guess your password. So that's where that comes into effect more.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, well, so one last one. Also, do you recommend password vaults with AES encryption?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. Absolutely recommend having some sort of a password vault. There are many that are out there. We highly recommend that you don't reuse your passwords. And because of that, if you have a password for your online banking and your online shopping and your credit card and your, all of the different passwords you have, any one of us nowadays probably has between 20 and 120 different passwords. So if you have 120 passwords and they're all sort of complex and they're all longer, they all 15 characters or longer, unless you're crazy sharp memory, you're going to forget your passwords, right? And so using something, we use a product called LastPass, but there are a lot of products that are out there that are encrypted vaults, like the person who just asked this question. So you have access to this password vault. They're online, highly encrypted, and so it's a great way to store your passwords. It's crazy, but I still see tons of people who use like a written notebook, whatever. They're writing down in a notebook all their passwords. I just scolded my mom the other day for doing that. So
yeah, I kind of still do that too, Mark. Sorry.
Yep.
One more question.
I'm going to move on here, Mary, for just a second, because I got a couple more slides and we can come back and answer any other questions here.
Right.
So
great.
Another thing that goes right along with passwords is we have to use two-factor authentication. It's another one of those things. It's kind of a pain in the butt. Everybody sort of cringes a little bit when we tell them that they need to do it. The idea with two-factor authentication is it needs to be a combination of something meaning your username and your password, with something that you have on your person. So that might be, your phone. So a lot of two-factor authentication rolls through your phone. So I'll give my username, my password, and then I will have to have a code that is texted to my phone or as part of an authentication app that I have on my phone. So I would turn two-factor authentication on everything. It used to be people were saying make sure you have two-factor authentication if you're using banking or online purchasing. I would turn it on for everything to get into your email system, whatever. The two-factor authentication systems that are out there right now they're fairly quick. It used to be you had to wait for a while for the code to come. It would be sort of problematic while you're waiting, and it was really sort of a pain. Anymore, you get the text notification or the authentication code that you need almost immediately when you log in. I would put two-factor authentication on everything, personally and in your business. Public Wi-Fi, we are really recommending that all of our clients just don't do it. It is extremely easy for the bad guys to sit in a coffee shop and sort of clone the public Wi-Fi that's in a coffee shop or in a public environment, and all of a sudden you're logging on and you're giving the bad guys access to your systems. And so, most cell phones now have incredible bandwidth. Most cell phones now have the ability to be a hotspot. And so we're really recommending that if you're connecting to a network, the network you're connecting to. And in the case of you're out in public at a coffee shop, The only thing you really know is your own network is your own cell phone. So we would strongly recommend that everybody stay off of public Wi-Fi. Backup is a huge thing as far as business continuity and cybersecurity goes. Your backup system needs to be multi-layered, meaning that you should have a copy of your backup on location at your offices. That allows you to get your backups very quickly. You should also have a copy of your backup in the cloud. The backup systems, any multi-layered backup system like this will have something called an air-gapped backup, so that even if the bad guys are in your system and figure out how your backups are working, they actually can go out and not be able to get into your backups, even if they've been in your system for a long time. So backup is incredibly important.
Mark, I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
One is, what if you're on a VPN at a coffee shop?
VPN is good. That creates a private network for you back to your office or whatever you have. And so if you're able to connect through a VPN, if your business has that or you have that personally, connecting through a VPN is a great way to go in a public environment like that.
Okay, and then I have one more. What do you think about Log4j?
I'm not sure. Was that the recent vulnerability that was discovered?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I know that our team was on that, and so whoever has that question, if they have a specific question regarding that, we would be happy to get them in touch with one of our engineers.
Okay, I've got Ian's information, so I can work that out afterwards.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
So I know we're getting fairly close to our time here, so I just want to do just a quick review and then open it up to any other questions. I really appreciate the questions that we did have. Super good questions that we had. But just as a quick review, I just want to remind everybody that basically everybody's a target. Again, this is probably the most frustrating thing that we run into every single week as we're out talking to people in the community. Is there's still this perception that we're a small business and nobody's going to hack into us, and we have to get rid of that. Everybody's a target. Everybody has the same sort of vulnerability. We also have to understand that this whole cyber environment has drastically changed. It is no longer, there are individual hackers out there, but they're not really the big threat. Where we have to be really afraid and really concerned right now are these massive organizations with massive amount of resources and funding that are attracting the smartest people in their countries to become these cyber criminals. Extremely well-funded or endeavor for most of these companies. We also have to just kind of remember that as humans, we suck at security. We are supposed to trust people. We're supposed to be nice. We're supposed to avoid contact. And every hacker out there knows that. And this is what they're feeding on. They're feeding on our emotions. They're feeding on things that we would be concerned with in the news, like politics, like the coronavirus, like the Super Bowl. And they're going to try to trick you to click on information that they can put into an environment like that. So as humans, we're very bad. And I think that's it. We have any other questions that we have?
Well, Greg did ask if they can get a copy of the recording and PowerPoint.
Yeah. So we will follow up with you. I think most of you have had some contact with Mary. Mary is on our community development team, as well as Dave. And so either Mary or Dave will reach out to you here within the next day or so. And we'll make sure that you get a copy of the PowerPoint deck and a copy of the recording. Did we hit record on this, Mary?
Yep, Adam actually did for me.
Beautiful. That must have been while I was messing around with my computers.
It was, and I was a little distracted. So Adam came in the 11th hour and saved me on that one.
All right, good old Adam.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll make sure that we get all the information, and if anybody has any specific questions, I know there were a lot of questions that came in there. Some of those were fairly technical and probably a little bit out of my pay grade. But we've got really smart guys on our team. If there are any highly technical questions that you have, let us have them. We'll be able to get you some answers. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time here today. One other thing I do want to mention, if we could, is we'll send everybody out a little survey. It's just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 questions. If you could give us any feedback about this presentation, any other topics that we could have covered, we'd really appreciate it. Our goal, we just feel very strongly that this is important information to get out to the community, and we want to get it out to as many people as we can. So if we can improve this in any way, don't hesitate to let us know.
Yep.
Again, I really appreciate everybody taking an hour out of their day to join us here.
Yep. And just a public service announcement. We'll be handling Microsoft 365 on March 8th. You'll all hear about it.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.